Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 1311. Choked off by the bell. Mina's Mar. And then it just ended like that, Mina said, disappointed. It was still early in the morning when Seth called her after hearing what happened. They had spent the last hour just talking. Since they had been busy the past few days, they had little chance to call the other, so they made up for the lost time. Choked off by the bell, Seth commented jokingly. Once the fight started, the cat girl had been convinced that she could take him down without relying on luck. She was excited to show off through skill and strategy, making her fortunate victory all the more disappointing. Really? A little later Finn and the eagles arrived and we finished cleaning up the place, she added with a depressed sigh. She seemed really down. This could happen sometimes. People with confidence in their skill may sometime feel overshadowed by the items they carry. Seth understood that. But he also knew this was not the case for Mina. Still. Does it really bother you that much that you won by triggering an item effect? Seth asked, playing morose with a hint of guilt. After all, he was the blacksmith who placed this burden on her. It was only to protect her. The stronger she was, the safer she was. To think he had made her too strong to be happy. No. That's not it. I love my items, especially our engagement rings. It's just. I was all prepared to go all out and prove my skill, and then this dude just croaked. If anything, I'm probably more disappointed in my opponent. Mina explained hastily, with a small blush. She had fallen for his act. Seth was glad that he managed to distract her from the unsatisfying victory. I know, he said with a warm smile. So, are you two returning now, that the business in Spring City is dealt with? The blacksmith asked the most important question. He was starting to feel a little lonely and was looking forward to their return. We will return in a day or two, Mina gave a rough estimate. That long? Seth couldn't help but exclaim, making Mina chuckle a little. Didn't you get all the pests? Why are you staying longer? To be honest, Finn developed a fable for the pet egg gamble. She wants to return to excellent beasts tomorrow and blow the rest of her money on pets. Mina revealed Finn's not-so-dark desires. It was Seth's turn to chuckle a little. Then we will probably be returning together, Seth said with a mysterious smile. Hey? Why is that? Mina asked, surprised. She didn't know about the late-night meeting yet, so it was up to Seth to reveal his not-so-dark plans of a day trip up the mountain. The volcano is going active again and you are going to take a look? Mina asked shocked. Yeah, just a little hike. I'm gonna have a look around, maybe a bath in lava for a little. I doubt I will be able to find the reason, unless it is really obvious, but I'm kinda intrigued by it, the blacksmith explained. Seth had the kin of fire trait, which not only made him immune to fire damage and made him able to use pyrokinesis almost for free, but even allowed him to heal by absorbing fire and heat. Yet, since he got that skill, he had been unable to take full advantage of it. He had never gotten the chance to just sit in a bonfire or enter a lava pit. All the fun stuff one could think of with full immunity to fire had been barred from him, so far. Since the chance lent itself to him now, how could he not go and try to take a healing bath in a lava river? But make sure not to burn off your clothes again. Mina didn't try to stop him, but made a joke instead, hinting at an embarrassing moment in the past. It was linked to his first death in a dungeon and his appearance in the nude at the Adventurer Guild. So Finn told you of that story, the blacksmith mumbled a little abashed. I mean, Finn does tell that story when she is drunk, but so did you. You actually told it in the bar, the very first time we met, Mina revealed with a grin. No. Yes. No, that can't be true, you are messing with me. I am, but it is also 100% true, Mina insisted, as she couldn't stop laughing at Seth slowly falling apart. He was sure that he kept that story a tightly sealed secret. Now he heard that he not only did he revealed it the first time he met her, but that Finn kept repeating it when drunk. That was actually even worse. That's it, no new items for Finn in the near future, the blacksmith made a resolution. The blabbermouth had to be punished, so she would be the last to get dragon items. What about me? Finn's voice could be heard from Mina's room. Finn? You were there? Seth asked, surprised. I just came in to get Mina, the fairy answered a little confused. How dare you blabbermouth reveal the burned armor incident, the blacksmith bellowed. How did you know? She asked, shocked, not even trying to deny. Whoops! Mina said with a grin. Minae! Finn cried tragically. Mina, you can tell her the punishment. I'm going on a hike now, the blacksmith ended his call. He was a little angry at first, but when he called out Finn, he was mostly messing with her. Seth was not actually angry, but he also intended to go through with the punishment. Finn really was a blabbermouth when drunk, and that needed to have some consequences. After ending his call, Seth got ready for his volcano exploration. He packed lunch and drinks that he got from Link in his inventory. For a moment, he felt tempted to use a picnic basket and pack a blanket, too, just for the joke, but he ended up not doing it. But he was serious about taking a dip in the crater of the volcano. With the salamander skin set, Seth even had a bathing suit for the lava bath. No matter how great the scorpion armor was, there was no way it would resist that kind of heat without damage. Only his golden fleece and the salamander skin were immune to fire. If he ever repeated his mishap and burned away his own legendary armor, he wouldn't be nude this time. Looking forward to taking advantage of his trait and seeing one of the greatest powers of nature up close, Seth was ready. He gave Mary a quick call to let her know that he was setting off, before he called out to the tower ego. Tower! Beam me up the mountain, he exclaimed. Instructions can't be interpreted. Please rephrase the command. The tower answered monotonously, taking the wind out of his sails. Seth sighed. Teleport me as close to the MT robbery as you can, Seth specified, after he got his play at a famous phrase ruined. That Gurna's protections were gone was not all bad. Without the interference of their barrier, the tower's teleport range spanned across the whole district and further. With the tower's help alone, he would before he finished the thought, it had already happened. Seth had phased out of existence, minus Mar, and appeared at the slopes of Mr. Robbery, far above Delta. It was a clear, cold day, and he had a great view of the massive tree before him and the city under its crown. Unlike his previous experiences with cold mountain wines, the salamander skin kept him nice and warm as he enjoyed the view. After taking in the scenery for a while, Seth turned his back to the city and looked up at the largest mountain of Earth. He started to have doubts. Even though he started at 2/3 of its height, maybe this was going to be a little more than a little hike. Chapter 1312 Mount Robbery. Mount Robbery, the solitary giant. With almost 9,000 meters, it was the highest mountain of Earth, and only now, that he started hiking around the latter part of the 5,900s, did Seth realize that he might have underestimated this behemoth. Looking up the steep rock faces covered in ice and down almost bottomless ravines filled with sharp edges and icicles that could probably rent a man to a fine paste mid-fall, Seth realized that this was going to be a little harder than walking 7,000 steps up a mountain in a game. Although he had been lightly fascinated by stories about explorers and mountain climbers that overcame incredible hardships to conquer the peaks of the central mountain range, Seth was here for the extra hot, juicy filling, not the rugged, powdery shell. The blacksmith tried hiking up the snow-covered slopes of the mountain, giving the trip a chance. Even when he used his high agility, the armor's teleportation and feather fall to move around quickly, it simply wasn't his cup of tea. But what to do if he didn't want to take a long detour along the cliffs and slopes? Clank! Where the blacksmith and the bard didn't know any further, the miner decided to make his own shortcut. Swinging his trusty adamantium pickaxe, Seth started tunneling his way into the mountain at a suitable location. Breaking his way through the crust to get to the succulent, molten core. Now, Seth had an appetite for a lava cake. Resisting the urge to touch his ration, he swung his pickaxe over and over. The legendary item, empowered by his superior mining leaf 5, ate away at the mountain as if it were made of actual cake. He could barely feel the resistance. Despite his longing for the liquid filling, Seth didn't dig straight through the crater. He had kind of expected this, but his mineral detection leaf 5 kept giving him a signal of mineral deposits along the way up the mountain, even more so now that he entered the mantle. Beelining through the jacket of the volcano like a woodworm, Seth came across various iron ore deposits of varying kind and quality, with magic iron ore being the most common. Magic iron may not be the best material out there, but it also wasn't the worst, it could be refined up to epic magic steel. Someone like Neil would be able to create great things with just that. Somewhat expecting to loot stuff, Seth had brought sacks with him to put the ore in, so he could place it more effectively in the inventory. Going here and there, dawdling a little as he collected materials, Seth kept getting closer to his goal. He could judge it by the rising heat in the surrounding rock. The high density of magic and fire elements within the mountain also had an effect on the materials he found. He found the ores of materials like hot nickel, cale cobalt, searing iron, or ignited copper. With most of these ranging between rare and uncommon, it was a good haul, especially to train the fresher blacksmiths back home. However, what made the blacksmith even happier was the small source of blaze iron ore he found in the region, where the surrounding stone was glowing red-hot and felt malleable under the strikes of his pickaxe. Blaze iron ore itself was epic and could be further refined to blaze iron and blaze steel, although Seth would have to get the smelting recipe first. Maybe Tord knew it. The exact way of refining it wasn't important now, what made him excited was that it was the first native source of an epic iron. With the ritual of Seth, the blacksmith would be able to create special bones of Seth from this, and since blaze iron was fire attributed, this was a triple score. First of all, its natural attribute didn't clash with the power of Seth, as he was also the god of the desert. Although fire or heat was not his main aspect, they didn't clash. On top of that, Seth's own trait would be able to further strengthen the material during the crafting process, as he had experience with fire element enchantments. As for the third score, this was a native resource of blaze iron ore, in a massive volcanic mountain, which Seth found to be full of iron veins. Seth didn't know the conditions for blaze iron to be created, but taking into account the pure chances, there was no way this was the only deposit. Seth was willing to go as far as to estimate that MT robbery had to be full of the epic ore. For a moment, he hesitated. What if they found the source of the rising heat and they stopped it? But only for a moment. The thought that at some point, he would have mined the entire mountain of its ore and then regret that he had destroyed the chance to create even more was ridiculous. It wasn't like epic iron was the only thing the ritual needed, and he definitely wasn't in dire need of legendary materials. He was actually hard-pressed to try and use what he already had. Like, at this moment, the materials of a full dragon corpse, as well as half the skeleton of an ancient dragon, were waiting to be turned into items. He still planned on forging legendary materials, too. Keeping another way to potentially generate legendary materials was not worth risking all of their lives. However, if he could have both, he would take it. Who would say no to a sustainable source of epic materials, right? At some point, his arms got tired. The rock around him was so soft, that mining it became near impossible. He was just carving lines into it, but not blowing out chunks. Since he didn't get anywhere like this, Seth changed his tactic. He placed all of his equipment that was not fireproof in his inventory, leaving him with the golden fleece, the Trignus gloves, the salamander skin, and some of his accessories. Before he started blasting the wall before him with pale blue flames from one, and dark red ones from the other hand, mixing his soul flame and the dragonic titan flame for maximum damage and heat. Seth used flamethrower, one of the spells his gloves granted him, and only used pyrokinesis to add the types of flames. Why didn't he circumvent the magic spell and only use pyrokinesis? In the current environment, Seth's health, mana, and even his stamina kept constantly regenerating. Thanks to fire absorption X from his gloves and his trait kin of fire. The only thing it didn't recover was mental power, the resource needed to use abilities like pyrokinesis. To avoid mental fatigue, the blacksmith used a magic spell that took mana and only used his ability sparingly. This way he actually didn't drain any of either of the resources, as they're regenerated faster than he used them up. With flamethrower surging against the already hot and softened wall, the blacksmith soon made his way further into the volcano, wading past puddles of molten rock flowing back into the holes and crevices he created with his mining. Seth couldn't help but feel excited. This was what he was imagining. Something as crazy as walking in and on molten rock, through a heat that would incinerate anyone instantly. It was an incredible sight and feeling. As he stopped mining and concentrated on melting his way into the mountain, his speed increased, and then he broke through. A great surge of magma, seemingly as fluid as water, broke through the wall before him. But it only looked like that, the punch of the magma string ramming into him took the air out of his lungs. He was flushed down his mine tunnel until he smashed against the wall of one of the many corners and niches he had dug. Resisting the incredible force of dense, molten rock trying to crush him, he managed to get a hold of a ledge, as the liquid earth passed over him. This was different from being hit by a water current, this was like being crushed by a sledgehammer. He was resistant to heat, but the physical force of the lava was tremendous. Seth could only rely on his stats and the defense of his remaining armor, trying to adjust to the situation and holding onto the rock wall. If it wasn't for Earth's memory, this would have been his end. The unique ring that supported his Earth magic, also granted breathe. He would not have dared this stunt if Earth's memory were not one of the accessories he was able to keep equipped. Originally, Seth was worried about the toxic fumes inside a volcano and relied on the ring to not need to worry about being poisoned to death. After all, who knew how well his poison resistance worked on that? He had not expected that it would save him from being smothered to death by Mother Earth's warm embrace. Chapter 1313 Magical Science. After a while, the power of the stream lessened. It was enough to allow Seth to try and move against the flow, but without the pressure of the stream pressing him against the wall, Seth felt the incredible buoyancy he had in the dense liquid. Floating in the dense magma like a cork, could be more likened to the magma trying to crush him against the ceiling of the tunnel. As the magma was still flowing, it was probably more like grinding him to a fine paste against the rock ceiling, but the blacksmith was a little too resilient to let that happen. Blindly grasping along the harder surface he was pressed against, he found it smooth, as he created the tunnel by melting through. His heart dropped for a moment, his thoughts racing to come up with a way to resist the slowed flow that was trying to push him back out. Then the blacksmith burst into a pale blue blaze and dug his hands into the ceiling. As they say, fight fire with fire. The moment he engulfed himself, parts of the magma flow below him became more liquid and even vaporized, and the blacksmith felt the pressure on himself only worsen. The inexplicable force that pressed on him now was worse than just the magma, so he quickly stopped and restricted the flame to his hands alone, before it was too late. With his hands creating his own holds along the ceiling, Seth pushed his back down against the viscous magma, so he could inch along the ceiling, searching for a way against the flow, back down the tunnel he had dug. Unfortunately, he didn't have X-ray vision and was pretty much blind in this situation. He could only feel his way forward, moving toward the breach where the magma came from, to enter what he thought might be the magma chamber or crater of the mountain. He kept going like that, when he suddenly grabbed onto emptiness and lost his hold. The moment he crawled past the ceiling of the tunnel, his buoyancy grabbed him with irresistible force. Having lost his grip on the ceiling, the backing that pushed him against it was now rapidly driving him upward. Unable to find anything solid to hold onto, Seth helplessly accelerated until he breached the surface and was spit out of the magma. He was catapulted several meters into the air before gravity remembered that it existed and pulled him back toward the magma. He wanted to use feather fall, but that was one of the skills of the lucky trinket, which was one of the items he had to take off, as it wouldn't have been able to resist this environment. The magma shot towards him and splat! Seth fell back onto the molten rock, which denied him another dive in. Ultimately he came to float, or rather lie on top the magma. The blacksmith took a moment to process what the heck he just went through. He just swam through molten stone, enduring over 1,000 degrees Celsius and the lack of oxygen. Then the liquid sludge literally spat him out. The weirdest thing was that all of it had actually felt comfortable, despite sounding like an absolute horror scenario. Out of all the things he could have imagined he would do in this place, he would have never expected something so weird to happen to him. This was definitely a magical experience. After all, he would be dead if he wasn't magically enhanced by his traits and items. Yet, what he experienced was fundamentally science. Nature had quickly proven to him that a skinny dip in molten rock was fundamentally impossible, to him. Even if the magma was like water, which it wasn't at all, he was just a cork, a water strider that was denied access to the secrets under the surface. When he finally managed to regain his bearings, Seth tried to stand up. Just like a water strider, he was unable to sink on the bright yellow surface. The lava below him felt mushy, as his slightly feet sank into it. It was hard to keep his balance as the magma did not really act like a solid surface. It felt weird and unstable. Seth had never really taken it upon himself to just walk through a swamp or bog on foot, but judging by movies and stuff he read in the past, he could probably be likened to that. It was hard, but he found a way to more or less keep his balance and finally stand up to have a proper look around. Although he was deep within the mountain, at least the place was well illuminated. The bright yellow and orange surface gave a great view of the chamber full of smoke and deadly fumes. It was the smoke that was rather obstructive to the view. Despite not wearing sight of Thaya, his necklace, he was able to roughly make out the dimension of the place he was in. Above him was a wide ceiling. The stalactites hanging from it suggested that he was in what used to be a natural cave. That, and his being able to see the boundaries of the cavity, he doubted that this was the magma chamber. It was probably just a cave that was flooded, just like his little mining shaft. This was not his destination, so he had to find a way to continue traveling from here. Since Seth had no way to orient himself based on what he saw, he looked at his map and the mini-map function. He had ignored it a little on his way in, as he kept beelining for mineral deposits, but since he was done playing around, it was time to get efficient with the direction he was going. The blacksmith tried orienting himself at the crater on the map. MT Robbery's crater was not huge, compared to the size of the mountain itself, so even after digging around for some time, and gaining quite a distance to delta situated on the saddle and west from the crater, he was still some distance off, according to the map. Although the mini-map was unable to display any details of his surroundings, except resources picked up by mineral detection, it indicated the cardinal directions. This was good enough to stay on track when he returned to blasting his way through the softened rock, leaving the magma cave behind. Starting at the wall of the cave facing east, Seth cast flamethrower once again, burning his way back into solid rock, leaving the mushy magma lake behind. Having learning from the recent experience, Seth didn't dig straight in. Melting another tunnel into the rock, the blacksmith aimed slightly upward, and kept making bends and serpentine. This was he hoped to be able to enter the conduit of the volcano, a funny word he learned when looking up info on the subject, above lava level and prevent being flushed again. In case he did get flushed again, he hoped the bends and serpentines would give him ample chance to get a grip instead of being carried all the way back. At this point, Seth's fantasies about having a fun trip were mostly gone. He had dropped any intentions of swimming in magma or enjoying the sights of a volcano up close. Harsh reality had ruined his expectations and he just wanted to see if he could find the reason for the mountain's activity, if he had a look around the vent or conduit of the mountain. He wanted to do what he could and then return back home, to soothe his broken dreams, of magma caves being a fun place to explore. Fortunately, he only experienced being flushed away by magma only once. It seemed like his strategy had worked. In exchange for making his pathway longer, he had climbed the mountain on the inside and was even able to use the pickaxe again on the later part. With the map at the ready, he finally broke through the flank of the crater. Cold fresh air with a slight smell of sulfur welcomed him. Chapter 1314 The Crater. Compared to the toxic vapor that had filled the tunnel, the sulfuric, cool stench of the crater was refreshing. Seth had finally escaped his subterranean adventure and entered the crater of MT Robbery. Looking up at the edge, where he could see the last rays of the waning day, he was somewhere around the top of the lowest quarter of the crater. From this place, he could see the whole, hollow top of the mountain. Compared to the whole thing, the crater seemed small on the map, but it was actually massive, and the blacksmith couldn't estimate how far away the other side of the crater was. As for the depth, Hellion, the Colossus of Rhodes would have easily been able to hide here, even if the golem was raising his hand in the air and jumping around. Something Seth doubted he would have been able to do, considering the look of the crater floor. Similar to the Demon District, where the demonic bards had taken advantage of the dormant volcanic activity for the crafting and created a landscape where lava flowed and volcanic gases were emitted, the floor of the crater was a similar hellscape. There were no blatantly open flows of lava at this point, but pillars of burning gases were shooting up everywhere from time to time, among the pools of boiling sludge and nondescript liquids. Although there were no lava pools, there were other signs of ducts where lava had risen previously and could do so again at any moment. Letting out a deep sigh, Seth sat down on a boulder for a moment, taking in the view. It was not the cartoonish sight of a huge lake of lava at the bottom of the crater, but it was a different, interesting sight to take in, and now a small barefooted figure, clad in golden clothes, was added to the painting of a nightmarish apocalyptic event. Seth sat there for a while. He watched the last rays of the sun vanish at the edge above and night fell inside the crater. He spent the whole day cutting away through the mountainside, but nothing interesting had happened, except his short meeting with reality and the laws of physics. As he reminisced today's journey, he suddenly heard something from behind. Steps? Just you wait until I find you, asshole. This kind of prank is not cool at all. The draft had seriously cooled down our living room. If my son gets a cold because of this, I will have your neck. Angry mumbling and steps could be heard from the tunnel behind him. Who would be around here? The blacksmith thought at first, but then he realized that this was no human language he was hearing, at least not common Erdhan. Only on second thought did he realize that it was unintelligible gibberish that was being translated by universal translation. Observing the entrance where smoke and gases rose to the sky, he saw a glowing orange figure appear in the smoke. Stepping out from the hazy vapor that originated somewhere in the bowels of the mountain was a humanoid that seemed to be made of glowing hot lava itself. They were covered in shells of hardened black rock and obsidian, that made it look like they wore rough armory, while the gaps exposed flesh that transitioned between glowing dark orange and bright yellow, as if magma was flowing, but kept in shape like the body of a slime. An elemental. Seth whispered, surprised. He had not seen them before and only heard descriptions. It made sense that fire elementals would live in places like a volcano, but it still surprised Seth to see one. As the blacksmith didn't think the other was a player, he used observe out of habit. Name, Valence score. Kin of Fire. Title, Magma Base Hunter. Age 92. Level, 87. Race, Magma Spirit. Affiliation, Remnants of the Immalat Kingdom. At first sight, Seth had been reminded of the stories about the immortal elemental dungeon the others had visited in the abyss, but it seemed like the bard had jumped to conclusions. Although elementals could take many forms, the appraisal said unmistakably that this was not one. Valence score also didn't count as a monster, but was a player who was part of the system. Seth doubted there ever existed spirits on Earth, at least not in the past several millennia. Also, if he were originally from Earth, he would be an Ori magma spirit. Finally, the remnants of the Immalat Kingdom suggested heavily that this guy and a bunch of others fled to Earth, similar to other invaders that came through the opened pathwork passages all over Earth. Seth's inadvertent mutter and use og observe caught the spirit's attention, and it turned the head towards him. It was a smooth, handsome human face with irises glowing bright white like magnesium flame. Said, piercing eyes, now focused on Seth H, who had spoken up. Hey, Goldie, are you the one that punched a hole in our ceiling? The creature voiced angrily. Seth looked at the entrance to the tunnel and considered what Valent has grumbled earlier, then he slowly nodded. I guess, I did, he said, uncertain. Who would have thought that he would come across something like a magma spirit? Newborn elemental maybe, but a settler from a different world? Since there was someone to talk to, maybe there was a chance that his suffering today was not for naught? My turn, are you guys rebooting Mount Robbery's volcanic activity? Or do you know why the volcano is becoming more active? The Tower Master asked directly. Obviously, since there were people that came from outside, Seth had the suspicion that it was their fault. If it wasn't, they probably knew something. Facing Seth's sudden question befuddled the spirit, and it seemed like he let go of his previous business. He might have thought someone built a chimney as a prank, but he came to realize that this was slightly more serious. Who are you to ask that question? Valent asked vigilantly. From his sudden change in tone, the bard got the idea that he had found the right people to talk to. He decided to try and create some pressure on the other. Just the Tower Master of Minas March. You know, we recently acquired real estate in the area. That little city down there at the slope of the mountain? Yeah, that's mine, and I am a little worried about my investments. An active volcano had a bad impact on housing prices in the area, he rambled on leisurely. The Tower Master of Minas Mar, the spirit asked, shocked, much to Seth's surprise. The blacksmith had not actually expected that the spirit knew about them. He had relied on voice of Seth to get a moderate amount of thread across. You know of us? The blacksmith asked, curious. He had not heard of any interactions between Delta and Magma spirits. Had the peddler of ruin invited and warned them of Minas Mar? Yes, Kiki keeps telling stories about the places outside whenever she comes to trade, Valent said, excited. His mood had completely turned. Kiki? Seth didn't know that name, but it seemed Valent seemed to have a good opinion of Minas Mar, so that person couldn't be a servant of Merkrautsar. Please wait, here I will get the chief to meet you, he said and ran back into the tunnel, before Seth could say anything. Did he run away from Seth, or was he really going to get someone with more authority? The blacksmith was undecided, but ultimately waited and gave Valent a chance. He decided to wait and see, and if nobody returned, Seth would have to go look for them. But that next encounter would be less than peaceful. Chapter 1315 Chief Kadun. I'm Chief Kadun of the Central. It is an honor to meet the Tower Master of Minas Mar, the menacing-looking fire spirit 2 times the size of Valent said with a slight bow. It was not just his size that differed, but the cooled stone shells that resembled armor were much more rugged and showed signs of damage from fights and weapons. In the end, the bard only had to wait 15 minutes before Valent's score actually returned, followed by the apparent chief of his tribe or people. He wasn't sure yet how they would call themselves. Refugees? Seth Smith, nice to meet you, I think, the blacksmith reciprocated with a slight bow. He was still unsure what to think of this. They didn't seem hostile, despite being evidently invaders that were trying to settle in their world. Young Valent said it was urgent and I had to meet you. He said you had questions which were better answered by me, Kadun said a little hesitant. It seemed like Valent didn't quite explain the situation. Not that there was much of a situation, yet. Yeah, they became a few more after you appeared, but let's start with the ones I asked him. Are you guys responsible for Mount Robbery's sudden increase in volcanic activity, or do you know why it started increasing? The bard repeated. Although it was normal for an active volcano not to just die, he guessed, but according to Simon and the others, the magical reason the volcano was about to explode in an apocalyptic event had already been diffused by the magic formation. Even though the formation was gone, the original danger was too, so it shouldn't break out. After hearing his question, Kadun was staying silent for a moment. He seemed to be humming in thought, while twirling his extremely long and bushy beard made of flames. Ultimately, he nodded with a determined expression. Yes, you could say that is our fault. We have been working on keeping the embers alive and reigniting the earth furnace in the stomach of Mount Robert, he admitted resolutely, stumbling at the Erdhan name of the volcano. There was a word Seth didn't quite understand, but this sounded like a pretty solid confession to Seth. But rest assured, we do not intend to let the volcano break out, he hurriedly added when he saw the bard squint at him. We are just trying to keep a constant temperature for our people, he tried to explain. Thanks for opening the second can of worms. Who even are you people? The blacksmith asked. Considering the affiliation he saw in Valent's status, they were not necessarily invaders, but remnants of a kingdom didn't necessarily mean refugees. This is a long story. I've been up and down the mountain all day, listening to a long story is just the right thing now. I hope you don't mind me eating something in the meantime, Seth insisted on hearing their story while having dinner. He could have gone on a murder spree. He had done so with the weasel people and he would do it again. But these guys were fundamentally different. Apart from rebooting an end-of-the-world natural disaster, they not directly harmed anyone as far as Seth knew. Kadun didn't joke when he called the story long, as the chief actually felt the need to start at the very beginning. The kingdom of Imalat used to be a powerful kingdom in a different world, but the traits that made them so powerful ultimately became their weakness. Fire spirits could only prosper in places with strong fire elemental mana, like subterranean magma flows or very active volcanic regions. As such, they usually lived below the earth, where they normally competed with dwarves, monsters, and demons for resources. Since their territory was usually deadly to any invaders, they had a great defense and a powerful offense, meaning they lived a good life. That was until the fire energy in their kingdom started waning. Not just their territory, but fire energy receded in all the known lands of that world. They suffered this fate for decades, constantly declining until their king decided that he could not watch any longer and sent their people out into the pathworks. So you were sent out into the unknown, your life and death decided by not much more than the roll of a dice? Seth asked when Kadun described their treacherous journey through the passages of the pathworks. Not fully. We trusted our diviners and traveled through routes that promised at least slight chances of survival. As long as some of us survived, Imalat wouldn't completely die, Kadun said solemnly. But Kadun was not done with his story and continued form where Seth interrupted. Apparently, they had been much more numerous, when they arrived in the far east of Earth, even further east than Seth's hometown. We had managed to find a region of rich mana and fire elements, where we tried to settle, but disaster struck. A bald man, wielding powerful skills, suddenly appeared one day among us. Shouting about demons and eradicating evil, our warriors were embroiled in a fight with the man and ultimately killed him, Kadun said, melancholic. That was a mistake, Seth summarized. The blacksmith caught on to the hints. They arrived in the east of Earth and suddenly met a powerful man spouting bullshit. It had to be a cultivator. If Seth learned one thing, that cultivators had the almost suicidal urge to take revenge, even if it killed them. At least some of them did. Kadun nodded. Soon after, more bald people appeared, calling us demons and attacking without mercy. We could only scatter and escape into the mana flows, abandoning our newfound home. The next part of the story was what one would expect. One way or the other, the fire spirits found their way to the central mountains, following the signs of the thing called the earth furnace. Here, not just empty robbery had awakened. After the magic formation spread out the magic power of the massive volcano to diffuse it, it activated smaller sleeping volcanoes in the surrounding. At first, they couldn't get close to Mount Robbery, while the formation was still active, but this problem solved itself thanks to Merkraut Tsar. This was when Kadun revealed something Seth was unaware of. Apparently, the formation was actually already disabled several months ago, not just right before Krishna left. Only then were we able to approach the remnants of the earth furnace. Recently, we started nurturing it so our scattered people could move here, to the central, instead of staying at the colder, smaller peaks. Kadun finally explained why the volcanic activity was on the rise. These guys were expanding. But although it had almost extinguished, it would have slowly recovered. Even without our help, Kadun quickly added to avoid a misunderstanding. So, if Seth believed what they said, then their original thought of the peddler of ruin leaving a not-so-nice surprise for Spacia became very likely again. What is that earth furnace? You mentioned it a few times now, Seth asked after he held back during the story. At this point, he had gotten a rough idea about their circumstances and it didn't seem like Kadun was lying, something the blacksmith would have Ray judge at a later time. He also had a vague image of what the earth furnace did, but no idea what it was. The fire spirit seemed to be a little put on the spot, as he didn't quite seem to know how to explain. Do you know about elementals? He finally asked, mentioning what Seth falsely thought they were in the beginning. The blacksmith answered with a kind of. Technically, there are two kinds of elementals. Those born on the elemental planes and those born natively. Like how world trees sometimes give birth to high elves, locations like the earth furnace or the heart of the ocean can give birth to native elementals. It is a potential birthplace for fire elementals, Kunlun explained. Chapter 1316 We would never let it. I'm not sure how to say this, but you probably understand that I don't feel comfortable with my neighbors not just booting up a volcano, but even prepare for something dangerous like elementals to be born, the bard finally said, after staring at Kadun for a while. What were elementals? This was not about the bosses in some dungeon at the Adventurer Guild's Holy Land. The salamander, whose leather served as material for his gloves, was a legend. Proper elementals were born somewhere close to being legends and grew to be fully fledged ones. We would never let it break out, Kadun assured him. All the heat that would be lost. That would be a nightmare, Valiant wailed at the thought of their hard work going up in smoke. Seth was almost willing to believe this, but that was not the problem. You just told me that you are repairing a spawn point for quasi-legendary monsters. How exactly am I supposed to not take that as a hostile action? Seth asked honestly. Maybe something like a salamander was less of a threat than the whole mountain going up in a bloom of magma and smoke, but it could also do a lot of damage. Especially considering that these guys were the survivors of a declining kingdom. They could very well be planning to turn the whole area into a hellscape of fire and death to make their lives more comfortable and reinstate their kingdom. Please let me finish. It would take millennia for an elemental to be born from a place like this. We are really just doing so trying to survive. Kadun pleaded pitifully. The massive, fire-bearded man had actually sunk to his knees, practically begging Seth. The blacksmith stepped back awkwardly. He didn't think that his words were this harsh. Wasn't the chief overreacting a little? It was disconcerting, seeing such a massive man, made of magma, beg in fear. Yes, please don't send the horsemen after us. Valiant fell to his knees next to Chief. I have a small daughter struggling with the cold and a son with barely enough brains to make a living. They still have their whole life before them, please spare us. Valiant cried, hot tears of molten metal dripping from his cheeks. What in the world was going on here? What the hell makes you think I would suddenly send the horsemen here? Seth exclaimed, exasperated. Ignoring whether he would do it, probably only Basilith would be able to fight effectively in such a hot environment. Kiki told us that Minasmar is not to be messed with, that you had several legends and commanded the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. She told us about your battle against Spacia, where you defeated almost 10 legends. And that Minasmar knows no mercy for their enemies. Everything flowed from Valiant's lips, as if it had been fermenting for a long time. Seth stared at Valiant. Dan, maybe he should hire that girl for propaganda. Her talent was clearly wasted on trading with these guys. If she was able to instill just half of this fear in the cultivators or other invaders, Earth would be a lot more peaceful. We tried to confirm what the little trader said, but we couldn't find anything that contradicted her stories. Please show mercy, Kadun full-on kowtowed to him, making it even more awkward. The blacksmith who didn't know how to react. Of course, this could have all been a smart ruse. Seth wasn't a lie detector like Ray, but the small amount of EQ he had raised since he left home and became a bard made him think that Kadun and Valiant were honest. Okay, listen here. I'm tired and I want to go back home. For now, I will believe you, but I will have people verify all you said again, so I want you, Kadun, to come down the mountains tomorrow and visit our embassy in Delta officially. I have people that are better in these kinds of negotiations. When you come, we can work out a way to become good neighbors and nobody has to bother any legends. Okay, the blacksmith offered honestly. He didn't feel like dealing with this any longer at this point. The best tactic for that was to make Lena or Mary deal with it instead. The perfect strategy for stress management. Delegate the problem somewhere else. Thank you for this chance. We will not disappoint you, Kadun said, touched. It was this kind of overreaction that made Seth suspicious. Either they were acting, or this Kiki girl was a real menace. Lena had to see if they could recruit her. Someone able to plant true fear into the heart of people like this had to be an outstanding talent. Okay, calm down. Just show up tomorrow, and we will find a way to deal with everything. Bye, Seth said his farewells and vanished. Usually, he avoided using his daily home call in case of an emergency, but on this rare occasion, he had no motivation to walk the way back home. Without Krana's shield, nothing stopped Seth from directly appearing at the entrance hall of Minas Mar. He no longer needed to take the detour through the system church. With the tower ego, he wasn't there for long and directly appeared at his quarters. Since he had eaten during Kadun's fairy tale, he just had to change into his pajamas and fall into bed. Minas and Finn had not returned today, so he had to go to bed alone, once again. At least, he would be home when the two came back. Delta, Minas Mar Square. What's going on here? The curly-haired blonde asked, surprised when the two of them came to the small square in front of the headquarters of Minas Mar in Delta. The former embassy seemed to be under the siege of a dense crowd of people. I have no idea, maybe something happened while we're in Spring City, the taller cat girl beside her said, shrugging with her shoulders. Mina and Finn had just returned from their mission in Spring City and decided to take a walk to the embassy, instead of directly porting there and down to the magic tower. The other day, they had tracked a few remnants still hiding in the city before they could return this morning. However, when they left the system church, they found this commotion blocking their paths. They exchanged a look and raised their hands to the air. A hologram of the golden crest of Minas Mar appeared above their hands. These were the upgraded versions of Seth's original rings, which could identify members among each other and allow entry. It's Minas Mar. There are lords of Minas Mar, the crowd clamored at the sight of the signs above the ladies' heads. Of course, not everyone got this kind of ring, these signs identified them as lords of Minas Mar and only the original founding members had these versions. Isn't that the smooth shadow, Mina? And the other one is the golden fist, Finn. The fairy brute is here. The sinuous shadow, where? I want to see. Some even recognized them and couldn't help but exclaim weird nicknames. Make way. Please let us through. Taking full advantage of their position, the two split the crowd like an ancient prophet once split the Sigma NC. Despite being treated as an even bigger attraction than whatever had drawn in all of these people, they did not dare to stand in their way. Minas Mar had become an absolute existence, nobody in Delta would want to offend. When the two finally got through the crowd, they arrived in a circle at the stairs of the embassy. Kneeling at the steps of Minas Mar's seat of power, was a group of 25 humanoid creatures made of magma. If they had not been kneeling, with their heads lowered, they would have looked quite menacing. The aura of power and tremendous heat they emitted was enough to roast ordinary people and even burn higher-leveled adventurers. Kadun, what happened? Valiant? Why are you doing this? A young woman asked worried. She was walking around them the group of magma people, desperately trying to talk to them, but she couldn't get close because of their heat and they didn't respond to her pleas. They didn't speak it out loud, but both had exactly the same question on their mind. What did Seth do this time? Chapter 1317 What did you do? A little earlier, inside the embassy. Seth, what did you do? Lena asked, shocked at the scene that was playing out at their doorstep. The blacksmith had informed her in the morning about what happened during his hike up the mountains and that they expected visitors, but nobody expected it to play out like this. Nothinga. Seth said indignantly, with a pout. It's that girl's fault, I tell you. She is the only person from outside they had contact with, and they have been acting really weird since the moment I met them, as if I'm someone cruel or fearsome, the bard argued. Maybe he was no messiah, but he was far from a villain. At least in his opinion. Lena looked at him thoughtfully. What? Are you suggesting, he squinted at her. "Oh, no. Please, oh great blacksmith, please spare me," she acted fearful, but without much passion. Seth knew that she was an excellent liar and actor, she was a diplomat, so she was simply mocking him. "Oh, save it. What do we do now?" the blacksmith asked unimpressed. "What is the problem?" "I will simply go out and defuse the situation," Mary said with a shrug, as if it were a common occurrence she had to take care of. "You did invite them, although their entrance is a little dramatic." The clamor of the crowd caught their attention and they looked back out where two holographic crests appeared above the crowd. Seth knew immediately that it had to be Finn and Mina, they were the only ones scheduled to return today. Who would have thought they would arrive with such impeccable timing? The question was whether this bettered or worsened the situation outside. Mary straightened her dress. "I better get out there and take care of the situation," she said with a sigh and left the room. Outside the embassy. The doors of the embassy flew open, and Lady Mary, another lord of Minas Mar, came out, flanked by two oath guards in their signature armor. The crowd was in awe to see three lords at the same time. It had not been such a big deal during the time when Krina was still on Earth, but now Minas Mar was the apex organization on Earth and had even fought back against Spacia. Since the epic war against the skeleton dragon and its summoner, the public opinion was completely in their favor. "Kadun, I greet you. I'm Mary, the administrative head of Minas March. Please stand up, it is unnecessary for you to kneel. The Tower Master invited you as guests." Mary greeted them warmly and loud enough for the crowd to hear her. She made sure that everyone understood, and nobody asked them to do this. "That's the Grand Vizier," the smaller Magma spirit whispered to Kadun in the center. Mary guessed that he was Valen. A silent "I know" came back from the chief. Mary also caught the panicked girl expression fall in horror. "Grand Vizier, these lowly subjects gladly kneel in your presence. We came to beg for forgiveness and hope to plead for refuge in your great lands," Kadun spoke in a booming, deep voice. His sentence raced across the square like a heat wave. Now, Mary was a little confused. This was not what Seth had told him, and she doubted the blacksmith would lie to her or let out something important. He wasn't that kind of guy. Just how did these guys come up with this? Her eyes fell on the girl. Was her name Kiki? At this point, she seemed torn between having a nervous breakdown and sinking to the floor in embarrassment. When her and Mary's eyes met, Kiki's went wide and she stiffened like a deer in the headlights. Maybe Seth was onto something there. "I understand. Please come inside, so we can talk calmly and privately about these matters," she invited the group of Magma spirits inside. However, there was a sudden shiver running through all of them, as she had just threatened their lives. "Please don't do this. We are ready to follow whatever commands the Grand Vizier has for us." "A word is enough," the big Magma spirit at the front begged, puzzling Mary even more. She truly couldn't guess their thoughts at this point. "Why you should go inside," a weak voice suddenly spoke to Kadun. Kiki, slightly shivering, seemed to have decided to act. The girl wearing black overalls and a beige shirt had her fist balled tightly, as if she had come to a grave decision to go through with. Although her body and voice shivered, her eyes looked firm. But Kiki, you said." Kadun finally reacted to her, after ignoring her all this time, but he was interrupted by the young woman's resolute shout. "I lied. Okay? I lied and exaggerated a lot to keep you away from Delta," she said, a glint of tears appeared at the corner of her eyes. "The truth is, that I nothing bad to say about the people of Minas March." Close to crying she stormed away, vanishing in the crowd. Kiki, the man presumed to be Valen, stood up, but couldn't go after her in the crowd. He would have hurt a lot of people if he rushed after her, but he seemed to know that and stopped at the edge, where people winced away from him. "Well, I have no idea what this was about or what you were told, but can we go in and talk now?" Mary asked awkwardly. Finally, albeit slowly, the Magma spirits stood up. They were still confused, but it seemed like their doubts about their preconceived notion allowed them to follow Mary's suggestion. "We will send someone to look for her," she assured Valen, who hesitated to follow the others. The man nodded and finally joined them in the entrance hall of the embassy. "Mina, Finn, you should also come in, since you already arrived," she added, speaking to the two lords who had arrived just in time to enjoy the show. The two smiled wryly and followed Mary in, too. Mary led the Magma people into the embassy. It was a good thing they had used high-quality materials, otherwise they might have been some damage to the floors. Right now, the floor didn't even start glowing red-hot, when they stood still. Although it was Seth who had organized this visit and the circumstances had turned a little awkward, his care and attention were focused somewhere else. Mina! Finn, the blacksmith exclaimed happily, as he embraced his girlfriends, who happened to arrive at the same time as their guests. Promptly, the three were in a world of their own, talking about everything that had happened to the girls and to Seth. Mary, Lena, the Magma people, and other staff could only stand by awkwardly until Mary and Lena decided to. They watched until Mary decided to leave the three alone in the entrance hall and invited the visitors into the meeting room, where they could continue with the negotiations. Since the Magma spirits were willing to cooperate, the secretary was sure they would be able to come to a positive conclusion, even without the Tower Master present. She looked back at the love-struck fool, happily talking with his two ladies. Especially without the Tower Master. Chapter 1318. You are already done? What do you mean? You are already done? Seth exclaimed, perplexed. He had just caught up with Finn and Mina, but when he came back to join the talks with Kadun and his people, Mary revealed that they were already done. Yes, things went very smoothly. Kadun and his people are very cooperative, Mary said with a bright smile. All the negotiations were already done, and the contracts were already signed, too. Seth felt surprised, but positively surprised. He was honest with himself, this was his least favorite thing to do after becoming technically head of a state, or whatever you might call Mina's march. Leader of a district? Yeah, that sounded accurate. Well, anyway, he really disliked diplomatic talks, so he was actually glad to have skipped that. The blacksmith gave the contracts a once-over, confirming that Mary and Lena had done everything to his satisfaction. The Magma spirits, or rather the refugees of the Immolate Kingdom, were allowed refuge in Mount Robbery. In exchange, they would manage the earth furnace, to make sure that the volcano would never break out and the volcanic activity stayed below a certain limit. They also had not forgotten the rich ore vein Seth found as he went through the mountain. The Magma spirits would tasked with mining these resources and they would be stipulated to deliver a certain amount of ores each month. The amount would be decided at a later time, once they had a proper estimate on the size. But this was of lesser importance, as Minas Mar had enough mines across the districts they were operating. It was more like a rent for letting them use the mountain freely as a residence and hunting grounds. Although he may not need it, Seth was looking forward to the possible supply of blaze iron. As long as they could procure the jackal and donkey blood reliably, they would have a stable source of special bones of Seth. That may not have been as good as a stable source of legendary Olympian silver, since the chaotic metals effects were randomized to a certain extent, even with Seth's lucky trinket allowing him to hope for better results. This seems all fine. Well then, Kadun, on a good cooperation, he congratulated the chief and offered his hand for a handshake. The Magma spirit hesitated for a moment, as a normal man's hand for vaporize if he grasped it, but Seth gestured to him to stop worrying and take it. They were both kin of fire, so nothing but a normal handshake happened, which surprised Kadun more than it should have. Since this is over, I'm returning home with Finn and Mina, he informed Lena and Mary before quickly leaving the meeting room. The moment he closed the door behind him, the three of them vanished and appeared back in Minas Mar, their magic tower. The three had a lot to catch up on, so they spent the rest of the day isolated in their quarters, enjoying each other's company, mostly in the nude. Are you Kiki? He asked the crying young woman. She was huddled into a niche of one of the ruins left after the Battle of Delta. Her messy black hair hid her face, but her clothing matched the description he had gotten. His voice interrupted her wallowing in her own misery and prompted her to look up at the man who had just spoken to her. Her reddened eyes ripped open wide, and she scurried deeper into the wedged debris. It wasn't like he couldn't understand the reaction. Suddenly being talked to by a huge muscular man, covered in macabre bandages and a dangerous aura was shocking, probably frightening. Maybe she had even seen the tournament and knew who he was and what was below these bandages, making the encounter even more horrifying. Nam understood, but it still hurt him a little, somewhere deep down. The cultivator looked forward to the day when he could completely drop the bandages. His situation had improved by leaps and bounds since the Tower Master created the charm of the 10,000 Poison Valley for him, but it took time to heal. He had spent decades with his cultivation suppressed to resist the poison eating away at his body. Even with the token his master had created, it had been too long, and he still needed time to heal. He was currently in the process of periodically expelling the poison that had infested every cell of his body. Once this was done, he could begin reconstruction and healing of the parts eaten away. Until then, he still needed the bandages, not to hold back the poison, but to hold together his body and cover up his hideous appearance. You have no reason to be afraid. Lady Mary has asked me to find you and invite you to the embassy, he spoke up again, his voice raspy and muffled from the bandages and barely having a functioning throat. The girl winced, cowering away from him. Since he had gotten the charm form the Tower Master, his 10-year contract had started and he was now working for Minas March. This meant that, apart from his free time he used to heal and cultivate, he would spend most of the day in the embassy, protecting Lady Mary and the princess while Love was absent. This time, he had been sent to locate it and bring back the girl called Kiki. As a consequence of the scene at the entrance, her name came up during the conversation with the Magma spirits. Apparently, she was a trader and the only connection between Kadun's people and Delta, trading stuff like food for ores from the Magma spirits. She, or rather her outrageous fairy tales about Delta and Minas Mar, was also the cause of said scene. For a young woman, she had a lasting impact on Kadun's people and was originally very popular with them. Despite her outbreak and confession, this had not changed. For one, Nam was supposed to bring her back, so she could talk things out with Kadun. Another reason was the Tower Master's belief in her talent for propaganda. She really had to have a talent for talking and charisma, to have a whole tribe of non-human believe her every word. Please spare me. I just tried to make a living. I didn't mean any harm, I just, he tried to explain, but started crying and wailing. From her unintelligible talk that followed, Nam could roughly gather her life story. In order, her parents died in Beta, and she came here with the first wave of refugees. She came of age soon after coming to Delta and was able to choose a class. She took the lucky draw, but ended up becoming a common merchant. Unable to fight or change her class immediately, she tried to survive with what life dealt her, failing miserably. There was no competing as a merchant without a foundation or backing in the big city. She couldn't go to the dungeon or level up either. She was barely able to make a living by risking her life and foraging for materials outside of Delta. Kiki met one of the spirits outside and managed to trade her meager herbs and food for ores she was able to sell in Delta for much better profit than what she collected. I lied to dem because I was afraid somebody would take dem away from me, she wailed tragically. Name actually believed her, that she felt guilty. Or she was a great actress. Either way, it was not for him to decide. Lady Mary just wished to meet with you. Nobody means you any harm, he assured her. The solemn cultivator would spend another hour listening to her and consoling her, before he finally got her to the point that she got out of the debris and was ready to follow him hesitantly. In moments like this he questioned, whether he made the right decision to sign that contract. Chapter 1319 If you start a siege. West of Beta, 2 days ago. Emerald City was overrun, Adam said seriously. They had finally found the governor in this cave, together with a small ragtag group that had assembled around him. The reunion was a bittersweet one, as they found Adam in not the best situation. After the initial happy greeting, the conversation had quickly turned to the reason Mike and his party were here, which was already a grim situation, but when Adam began explaining, he outdid the situation of THRES by a mile. The situation in the city had turned worse, and after the discovery of the cyber worms you warned us of. The completely holed up in their barrier, kicking out strangers and mercilessly letting people die outside of the barrier, the governor explained. That was the time Adam decided evacuate their hideout and stop their operations in Emerald City with the last evacuation. They had been in the middle of preparations, assembling the people they had freed and recruited, when Emerald City's barrier was penetrated. It was not a hidden hole in the defense as the one Adam used to smuggle out people, but the barrier was literally overcome. He didn't know how, but the cybernetically enhanced beasts and humans, that had been stopped by the barrier to this point, were suddenly able to simply charge through. We had no choice but to flee with our half-finished preparations. In the chaos, I was forced to leave my communication orb behind, in favor of carrying more provisions and equipment. I didn't think much of it at the time. Even with lacking preparations, the journey wasn't supposed to take longer than a couple of weeks, he said wryly. Things didn't turn out as expected once they fled Emerald City. The surrounding jungles had turned extremely dangerous. They were filled with infected beasts and the human victims of the cyber worms, that had seemingly lost their minds. It was as if everything affected by the worms had assembled in the surroundings of the city, making their breakthrough and subsequent journey an ongoing tragedy. By the time Adam entered the vicinity of Beta, he had already lost many good men and half the people he saved from Emerald City. But things didn't end there. They had set up camp outside the mushroom territory, and Adam went ahead to scout a path with the people who were now seated in this cave. When they returned to camp, it had been laid to waste. The people from Emerald City and many of his subordinates had been taken away, the rest lay dead in the dust and embers left of their camp. The governor couldn't leave his friends, men, and the people he promised a new home behind. Their group took a while to track down the enemy all the way until they found this secret base. However, this place was an absolute fortress, probably a repossessed bunker from the time before the districts. They had spent the past weeks observing it to come up with an infiltration and rescue plan. What we came to observe led us to believe that this is actually a base set up by the people of Emerald City, Adam finally revealed, as he started to explain about the mountain, which Ray found to be filled with malice and suffering. Why do you think so? Mike asked grimly. Just how many secret bases and laboratories did the upper class of Earth operate? Because soon after we found this place, a helicarrier bearing the logo of Emerald City, protected by a bunch of flying mounts and helicopters, arrived here. Those were probably the people responsible for this base, who had also fled from Emerald City some time after our own rushed exit. It's also the reason why I concluded that Emerald City must have ultimately fallen. The rats have left the sinking ship, he added disdainfully. I see. You must have been watching this place for weeks now, do you have a plan? Mike finally asked the important question. Adam had not contacted THRES for over a month now, he must have had something to show for the time he sat in this valley. However, Adam grimaced. The longer we observed, the more hopeless things became. Every time we thought we might have found a loophole, we found that it either was covered by another measure or that we would not be able to use it, he revealed with a sigh. To be honest, I was already deliberating to return to THRES to get reinforcement, the governor revealed. I see, maybe we can help? I'm sure if we pool our knowledge and skill together, we can do something about this place, even if we simply end up breaking down the front door and charging in, Mike said jokingly to lift the mood. He worked slightly, getting a wry smile out of the governor. Over the next 2 days, Mike's party and Adam's people worked together to observe the bunker base and come up with a plan to infiltrate and rescue the captured people. Ray was especially motivated, as this was one of the places Solfium would urge him to eradicate. West of Beta, present. Everyone got the plan memorized? Adam asked in the small cave. He was surrounded by a group made up of his own and Mike's party. Everyone nodded grimly. They had spent 2 days getting ready for today. Everyone's eyes were filled with determination, especially Adam's people. What had seemed like a hopeless endeavor to Adam and them after spending weeks stagnating in this place, finally seemed to come together with great chances of success. Are the preparations done? Adam turned to Tanomol, the goat demon and soul trader. The goat nodded slowly. I finished setting up the magic circle yesterday. I just need to activate it now, the demon assured him. Adam nodded. After making sure everything was in place, they left the cave. Everyone's gaze turned to the hateful mountain at the end of the valley. It seemed like an ordinary mountain from the distance, but knowing what was inside made it look like a looming danger, towering over them menacingly. After listening to Adam and scouting it himself, Mike realized that this was not just a mountain or a bunker base, it was far more. He also understood the difficulty Adam had faced with it. Thanks to Ray, they knew that the mountains were hollowed out with tunnels and rooms, as he could detect the people and miasma inside, but the outside was far more worrying. The mountain itself had a shield comparable to the one of Emerald City, which stayed invisible until something collided with it. The only entrance through the shield and into the bunker base was huge hermetically shut concrete gates reinforced with epic materials and strengthened with magic. Adam may have been able to break through that, but it would have taken him at least an hour. Meanwhile, the entrance was guarded by magic turrets, a product of past Y City. These things were manned by cannoneers who would blast any player or beast to bits from a mile away. Even with Tekker's defenses, if they concentrated fire on them, they probably wouldn't have to break the gate. So, how could they possibly break through a city-grade barrier and gates made to withstand the roaming beasts of Beta's wilderness with a group barely counting 20 people? Are you sure they are coming? Adam asked, looking at the sky with worry. Don't worry, once I begin, they will be here in a second, Mike assured him with a knowing smile. Then, turning into a huge anthropomorphic lion, the chosen of Mahis reached his hands to the sky and focused his powers. In the skies above the mountain, dark clouds started brewing and faint thunder echoed in the valley. The Scarlet Lord was a god of war, but also the god of weather, mostly known for thunderstorms. It was not weird for Mike to have a few skills associated with manipulation the weather on his declared battlefield. When the heaven had blackened above the mountain base, the faint thunder from before suddenly roared with unprecedented power and bright lighting arched through the clouds. In the far distance lightning strikes cast the shadow of an eagle on the clouds. Adam's heart quivered at the sight. "There's our reinforcements," Mike stated as heaven's gates opened and an ungodly amount of rain poured onto the mountain before them. Chapter 1320 Better prepare siege weapons. So the lightning eagle really became a legend. Adam mumbled, shaking as he felt the unique pressure of Ceres and remembered how the eagle had treated the questing beast. As he said so, lightning began to strike the barrier encapsulating the mountain base. However, the barrier held up. For a moment, Adam dared to have doubts, but then he witnessed a scene that had struck fear into anyone who saw it during the Battle of Delta. Churning in the clouds, a terrifying tornado took shape and quickly extended its funnel down toward the magic barrier. Following the descent of the glowing eagle, a massive amount of clouds descended into the tornado. Like the black finger of a deity, coming down to crush a lowly mortal, the clouds became the finger of God. Where Ceres ripped into the barrier, a bright light flashed as it looked like all the lightning charge was sucked from the surrounding thunderstorm and concentrated into a single point. The discharge was nothing short of an explosion, as the lightning strike blew away the barrier and struck the crown of the mountain. The tip of the mountain base ripped apart, sending massive boulders down the slopes. Moments after they saw it, a shockwave almost threw them off their feet and the sound of the explosion almost deafened them. The whole surrounding shock, causing landslides and rockfall everywhere. The broken barrier that lit up in a pale green, before it disintegrated before their eyes. A single, concentrated hit from the legend had brought the seemingly insurmountable defense. But the party didn't get a moment to take a breath. The original plan was for Ceres to take down the barrier and the turrets, to give them the chance to break through the gates using their strongest attacks. However, before they could start charging toward the mountain base, anticipating that Ceres would take down the turrets next, a ray of sunlight descended from the dark clouds. Maybe a ray of sunlight was too benign a description. A concentrated plasma beam, bright like the sun, shot out from the dark clouds. The massive beam descended onto the area of the entrance and the turrets. Slack-jawed, the party watched as the turrets and gates were disintegrated under the relentless radiation of light. An area the size of several football fields had been cleansed from existence, turned into a smoldering circle of ashes and embers. Mike's heart raced in shock and then in surprise. He took a deep breath as he realized what had happened. The Parrot of Doom had not come alone. Bringing along the nightmare centipede hidden in the clouds above, there were two beasts of the beasts of calamity present. Seth had actually sent Puffles along with Ceres to help them. What in the world was that? Can Ceres do that? Adam exclaimed, his voice several pitches higher than usual. While the members of Minasmar were quickly able to recognize Puffles' attack, the people from THRES had no idea about Puffles or the beasts of calamity. Don't worry, that's Puffles, the mighty, the pet of the Tower Master. It seems like Seth sent us a little more reinforcements than we asked for, Mike hurriedly explained. Come on, now we have to hurry if we still want to go through with the plan, the champion urged Adam and his men. The gate was already down, allowing them to conserve their power. This was the moment to strike. Shaking their heads to get out of the stupor, Adam and his men belatedly followed after the party from Mina's march. The whole mountain shook, interrupting her restless sleep. The painkillers couldn't stop the nightmares, so she was glad about the interruption. Opening her eyes, the vision augmentation sprang into action, scanning the small cell she was held in. Small, light blue circles emphasized the small cracks that had formed across the walls of her prison, while the cybernetic feature fed loads of information back to her brain. Meg raised her head from the pillow to look through the small, barred window in the metal door. She could see the ceiling of the corridor outside, and the enhanced zoom of her right eye allowed her to make out the same cracks as inside her cell. Something must have struck the base. Something extremely powerful. Maybe this was her chance? Their chance? Meg Huffin had a hard time estimating how long she had been stuck in this place. Ever since she was caught by bandits, her life had turned into an odyssey that dropped her from one tragedy to the next. The only short pause she was allowed was the time she spent with the other victims of the cybernetic experiment, after she was refused entry to Emerald City. In that group, not everyone had the same symptoms and ailment, but they all had to do with an experiment to fuse humans and machines. Like Meg, the group was made up of the few people that managed to escape thanks to the lightning bird and keep their mind despite the horrifying tortures of their experiments and ongoing ailments, like Meg's progressing transformation into a biomechanical robot. At this point, her whole right arm has turned, not even showing a sign of normal skin. The infection had wandered up her shoulder and recently transformed her right eye. Thinking back to that made her shudder. She would have probably ripped out her own eye if she had not already been a captive in this place when it happened. They had strapped her to a gurney and regularly pumped her full of sedatives to allow the transformation to progress. Her right hand grated as she balled it into a fist with all her strength, thinking back to that. It was a few weeks after she joined the group, surviving in vicinity of Emerald City, that they were attacked by powerful players and captured to be brought here. Once again, she was subjected to human experimentation concerning her being turned into a machine. For better or worse, she counted as a precious specimen this time, so her treatment was significantly better than at the first place. She even got painkillers, so she was able to relax on rare occasions. Although these people kept claiming they wanted to help them, Meg had her doubts. Who would literally kidnap people and keep them locked up to help them? They dangled the bait of suppressant in front of them, but so far, all they did was watch her and the others slowly turn further and further. If anything, they only made the process less painful. Not that she complained about being free of pain, it was a nice break, but this was not the place she wanted to spend the rest of the time she had as a human. Who knew what would happen to her once the transformation reached her brain? She doubted she was the only one with that opinion. She didn't get to meet the others often, but judging by how well she knew them, she doubted they believed anything these guys said. Focusing on the sound she picked up with her right ear, which had also experienced enhancements, she was able to make out the positions of the guards in the vicinity. As she thought, the guys usually making sure they didn't do anything funny, had rushed to whatever was going on outside. With a split-second decision, her clenched fist rammed into the metal door of her cell, leaving a small dent. Dust fell from the ceiling every time she punched the door. "Meg, what are you doing?" The hushed call came from the door on the opposite side of the hallway. "Something is attacking the base, didn't you notice?" "This is our chance to get out of here," Meg said, similarly hushed. The other had an even better hearing than hers. A short silence followed. "If you managed to open your door, please don't forget me in here." "Don't worry, if I get out of here, I will make sure to take everyone along."